Born to Achieve. Born to Achieve. Welcome to Born to Achieve podcast, the show that inspires and motivates you to unlock your full potential and achieve your goals. With your host, Warren Andrew Pinder. Let's get started on this week's episode of Born to Achieve. Born to Achieve.
I am born to achieve greatness, and so are you. Our guest today helps entrepreneurs, individuals, and organizations to achieve their success through speaking. His name is Dr. Danny Brassell. He has authored 19 books, including Leadership Begins with Motivation and Misfits and Crackpots. The co-founder of the Well-Founded Story Workshop. Danny helps us, we help us to share with our audience exactly that, how you were able to assist everyone that's listening today with speaking, to become successful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Warren and Dominique, and thanks for spreading some joy in the world. I love your energy. Keep it up.
Thank you. Yeah. So here today, I must tell our audience, our listening audience, that this has been a well-expected, right? In modesty, he's not saying exactly who he is. He's a well-sought-after speaker. So here, we are here. You all know that the Born to Achieve Greatness podcast is about sharing and speaking. So I'm going to sit back right now and ask our guest, Danny, to help us exactly to teach us how we can learn to motivate others to become successful through speaking.
Well, thank you for that, Warren. If I was going to write an autobiography, it would be called Pivots, because I feel like I've already lived 9 different lives. 30 years ago, I was a journalist, got to cover President Bush Sr. on the 1992 presidential campaign. And it was great because I got to meet every major editor of news dailies around the country. And one editor offered me a job doing the City Beat for $16,500 a year. And then a friend told me that they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, for the high pay. And I actually fell in love with teaching. I've taught all age levels, from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And things were rolling along smoothly until 2005, when my wife and we attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. And I could focus on all the negatives, but I'm a positive person. I learned a lot of lessons. First of all, my wife, I learned, is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stood right by me. She's an incredible human being. Second of all, money's no longer my ultimate motivation, because I learned you can lose that just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people, because if I was somebody who looked at what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize, unless you know everything about a person, you don't really know anything about a person. Fourth, became Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to confess, but the more I read the Bible, I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And then fifth, I really didn't want to file for bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, you have to make this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side, and I hit the number right on the number. Well, then the next year, Warren, he gave me a much higher number, and I hit that number right on the number. So in year 3, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which attracted the attention of a lot of different speaking bureaus and speaking training companies. And I was privileged enough to work with one of the top speaker training companies in America. And that's where I met Coach Jimmy Hayes Nelson, who's now co-founder of my company, wellcraftedstoryworkshops.com. Him and Dave Ward are my co-founders. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer, because my background is in academia. Coach Jimmy used to be on Broadway, and Dave used to be an attorney. Well, we used to coach these groups. They'd have 30 to 50 successful business people in the room, and they would pay $10,000 to work with us for 2 days, creating what now Jimmy and I call is a well-crafted story. This is a presentation that you're going to use again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences. But Coach Jimmy and I had a concern. And the problem was that these people had 2 days to work with us, but they came from lots of different industries. They only had 2 days, and there really wasn't much follow-up. And the company really didn't care about the follow-up. So the reason we created our company is we wanted to create a more sophisticated brand where we were able to stick with people, help them succeed, not just build their talk, but make sure that their talk was converting and getting them a lot more clients. And it's been actually one of the happiest experiences of my life, because as a teacher, I've always had a very high standard for my students, and I will not let you fail. And the great thing about working with entrepreneurs and business owners and executives is they're highly motivated. They do the work. And I've been seeing people succeed beyond their wildest imagination. So it's very good. And so what we do is we have a process that we take people through to help them create their well-crafted story. That's a very long answer to your short question, Warren.
Wow. A teacher, an actor, and a lawyer. Who took the lead in that?
That's right.
Wow. So how, okay. So to introduce us to that process that you use.
Yeah, so we call our process the 5 C's process. You have to forgive me. I'm a teacher, so it has to be either
that answers the question.
Yeah, it has to be alliteration or rhyme for me to remember anything. So the 5 C's we take our clients through are first of all, you need clarity before you start creating your presentation. And then the 4 components of your presentation are how to connect with your audience, how to teach content, how to create a clear call to action, then finally how to build an emotional close. And so before anything, we always tell people you need clarity on what you're speaking about. And there are 2 questions that if you can answer these 2 questions, you're in good shape. But if you can't answer these questions succinctly, or you can only answer one or the other, you're going to have some struggles as a business. And so the first question is, who is your audience? So a lot of people we work with, they'll say, well, my audience is everybody. Well, if your audience is everybody, your audience is nobody. The riches are in the niches. The more you get very specific about your audience and who you want to serve, the better you can serve them. And usually what I suggest to clients is find an audience, of a tribe of people just like you that you're comfortable with. So for example, when I first started speaking, I was a teacher. And so I spoke to teachers. And then I got comfortable speaking to teachers. And so then I expanded and I started speaking to the parents of my students, of students of different schools. And then I got even more comfortable. And so I started training school administrators. And then I was in a mastermind, and an owner of a very successful technology company wanted me to train his sales force. And I said, well, I have no experience in sales. And he looked at me like I was the stupidest person on the planet. He's like, Danny, you got middle school inner city boys to read Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure you can motivate my salespeople. And so that expanded my mind. So there's no problem expanding your audience, but the more narrow your audience to begin with, the more successful you'll be. And it's amazing. I was working with a woman a few months ago, Kathy, and her niche is she makes saddles for professional polo players.
Wow.
Most interesting niche I'd ever heard. I said, well, how much money did you make last year? And she said, oh, about $800,000. And my jaw dropped to the floor. I'm like, I need to learn how to make saddles for professional polo players. What a great niche. But that's a very narrow niche, very specific. Right. And if she wants to expand to equestrians or to women, she can do that. But she was smart. She started off small. So that's the first question you have to answer. The second question you have to answer is, what is the problem that you solve? And the biggest problem I see with most people is rather than saying the problem that they solve, instead they say the solution that they have. So for example, I was working with a fitness instructor and I asked her, well, what's the problem that you solve? And she said, healthy living. I'm like, that's not a problem. Healthy living is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Maybe the problem is obesity. Maybe that's what you're fighting, because that's what you're speaking the language of your audience that way. This is the problem I have, and they don't really care about your process. They just want you to solve their problem. We work with a lot of financial planners, and so I'll ask financial planners, what's the problem that you solve? And they say, well, having a good, healthy retirement. Well, that's a good thing. That's a solution. Maybe the problem that you're solving is making sure people have enough money until the day they die. That's a problem. So
that's a problem.
If you can answer those two questions, you're gonna do pretty well. And then we can actually start creating your presentation, Warren. Sorry, I'm long-winded. I need to.
No, 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 you. This is what we're here for. This is what we're doing.
Thank you for joining today's podcast. We'll be right back.
Achieve Man, written by Warren Andrew Pinder and Dominique Bradford. This book passionately focuses on the challenges women have been made to go through and how to overcome them. In some cultures, being a woman disadvantages the girl child. This book carefully exposes the hurdles you might face. This masterpiece is the ultimate self-help guide for women. It reveals your true purpose and identity. Get your copy today. Available from Amazon.
We now return to today's podcast.
You said leadership begins with motivation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Talk about it, misfits and cockpits. Explain exactly what was that about.
Yeah, so those are the last two books I've written. So when I was a middle school teacher, I was the only teacher in the school that none of my students were tardy. And the reason was because I always started off class by reading aloud a Paul Harvey story. So when I was a kid, Paul Harvey was this guy who would come on the radio every day at 12:15, and he'd say, "I'm Paul Harvey," with the rest of the story. And for 5 minutes, you're trying to guess who's he talking about or what's the company. And my students loved it. But the problem is Paul Harvey was kind of old. So the people he talked about were people like Greta Garbo and Fred Astaire. And the companies were like Sears Roebuck. And kids didn't know what he was talking about. And so I wrote the book, Leadership Begins with Motivation, as an homage to Paul Harvey. But after I wrote it, Warren, I read it, and completely unintentionally, a lot of the examples I gave were of white male Americans. And so the last book I wrote, which just came out, is called Misfits and Crackpots. And this book contains stories mostly about women, minorities, and international people. It's actually, I had more fun writing that than anything. And I actually made it into a podcast for the people who are too lazy to read it. They can at least listen to it.
Listen to it.
They're just inspirational. Actually, I got a story that you guys might like in here. Let me see which chapter it is. I don't know if I have. We'll see if you can figure this out, because this is your part of the world. See if you can guess who it is. So the chapter is Position Yourself to Succeed. And the quote starts off from Arthur Ashe. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. So here's the story. He knew no poverty because he knew no better. Growing up the youngest of 7 children on Cat Island, Reginald and Evelyn's youngest son lived a happy childhood. His family had no plumbing or electricity. The island did not have much in the way of schools or jobs either. They had no radio, television, or telephone, no cars, not even a paved road. In fact, he had never seen himself in a mirror. He had only seen his reflection from pond water or baking pans. As he described it, what's coming at you is the sound of the sea and the smell of the wind and your mama's voice and the voice of your dad and the craziness of your brothers and sisters. And that's it. For the first 10 years of his life, he lived on that idyllic Bahamian island. After his father's tomato business failed, however, his family moved to Nassau. As he told it, everything changed. At the age of 10 and a half, I ran smack into urban. Modern, cars, movies, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, bars, dance halls. And that transition from childhood idol to urban launched me straight into manhood. By the age of 14, I was no longer a child. His life could have taken a turn for the worse, but he had extraordinary parents whom he admired greatly. Although his father was a poor man, his youngest son saw him do extraordinary things. Reginald worked hard to provide for his family despite his rheumatoid arthritis, and his son respected him for never losing his dignity. Mom was a quiet woman, a loving woman, a hard worker. She would scour around their Nassau neighborhood in search of big rocks, some as heavy as 50 pounds. For weeks, she would crush the stones into tiny pieces and sell the completed piles to men to use as gravel. And with some of the money she made, she would buy flour sacks and make pants and shirts for her children's school clothes. Her youngest son only attended school for a couple of years in Nassau. By the age of 13, he was doing hard labor around construction jobs. After his best friend was sent to reform school and his older brother Cedric was sent away to the colonial prison system for a petty offense, his father feared his youngest son, too, would fall into delinquency. So he sent him away to Miami to live with his older brother, Cyril. While Miami and the Bahamas shared a similar climate, Nothing had prepared Reginald Evelyn's youngest son for the inequities that existed in the American South of the 1940s. He had never had to be conscious of stepping off the sidewalk to let someone pass. Arriving at the age of 15, he realized that there were different values in America. He later recalled, "Here you're not the person you think you are. But I came with 15 years of preparation. I was strong enough to say to myself, the me that I'd been for 15 years, I like that me. That's a free me. I can't adjust to being a restricted me. The law said you cannot work here, live here, go to school here, shop here. And I said, why can't I? And everything around me said, because of who you are. And I thought, I'm a 15-year-old kid, and who I am is really terrific. Luckily, I had the beginnings that I did. And every time restrictions were in my face, I could say, let me remind you who I am." Fortunately, his mother and father provided him with strong roots, and his strong will and character would serve him well throughout his life. After working a summer kitchen job in the mountains of Georgia, he found himself in an Atlanta bus station with $39 in his pocket, enough to buy him a one-way ticket to New York City. Arriving in Harlem with only a few dollars in his pocket, he slept in bus stations and on rooftops until he earned enough money to rent a room. In order to escape the cold, he lied about his age and joined the Army. But the Army did not suit him, and he acted insane to receive a medical discharge. By the time he was 18, he was back on the street in New York, trying to make ends meet on a dishwasher's salary. Scanning the want ads of the Amsterdam News, he saw an ad that read, "Actors Wanted." He later recounted, "What the hell?" I thought. "I have tried dishwashers wanted, porters wanted, janitors wanted. Why not try actors wanted? I figured that I could do the work. Acting didn't sound any more difficult than washing dishes or parking cars." But when he auditioned for a role at the American Negro Theater, the man in charge quickly let him know he was in over his head, as he could barely read. "You just get out of here and stop wasting people's time," the man told him. "Get yourself a job as a dishwasher or something." How did that man know I washed dishes for a living? He thought to himself. Resolved to prove the man wrong, he would listen to the radio for hours on end in his apartment, repeating every word to modify his accent. And at work, a generous elderly Jewish waiter volunteered to read the newspaper with him every shift. They studied late in the restaurant, long after closing time, night after night. And it worked. 6 months later, the American Negro Theater accepted him to become their janitor, and they let him study acting in their troupe. His acting gradually improved, but when it was time to cast the first big production, they cast someone else for the lead. Settling on being an understudy, he had to fill in for the lead on the night of the production's first major run-through. As luck would have it, a casting director saw his performance and enjoyed it enough to cast him in a production on Broadway. While the play was panned, critics praised his performance, and that performance led him to another Broadway show, and that show led to his first movie. He seemed bound for success, but it was never an easy road. His acting career had a lot of false starts. The work was not always steady, and despite receiving acclaim for his early film roles, he found himself back in Harlem washing dishes. He opened a few rib joints with a buddy, but with a wife and a daughter and another child on the way, he was struggling. Still, when a prominent agent offered him a role in a film, he passed, to the astonishment of the agent. Reginald and Evelyn's youngest son had a problem with how his character handled himself. The character had no dignity, and he wasn't going to play any role that might dishonor his values. He turned down a role that would pay him $750 a week and borrowed $75 on the furniture in his apartment because he desperately needed the money for the birth of his second daughter. "Well, I'll tell you what," the agent said. "I don't know what's going on with you, but anybody as crazy as you, I want to handle him." The crazy kid from the Bahamas would change Hollywood. His films were box office hits, proving that stories centered around African American characters could be commercially successful. Over the course of the next 50 years, his performances were not only critically acclaimed, but also challenged audiences during the height of the civil rights movement. He used his celebrity status to advocate for social change, and he became a symbol of hope and inspiration for many who sought racial equality. And his unprecedented Academy Award for Best Actor shattered the racial glass ceiling in Hollywood and opened doors for future generations of minority actors. His commitment to roles that depicted African Americans with dignity and complexity set him apart in an industry that had long perpetuated racial stereotypes. By becoming the first African American to direct a film that grossed over $100 million, he also paved the way for other minority directors and filmmakers to follow. Indeed, the Trailblazers' body of work has left an enduring legacy. Countless actors, filmmakers, and activists credit him as an inspiration as his work continues to be studied and celebrated. But it was the enduring values of dignity that positioned Reginald and Evelyn Potier's youngest son, Sidney, to succeed. So there you
Yes.
go.
That is so profound. What you have written is that about our very own so Sidney Poitier.
You inspired me with your Bahamas story. So
Certainly. So the thing about it is my grandmother told me stories of how what you did. He actually shined shoes when he was in Nassau. So quite a few persons knew of him, and the greatness that he achieved. And that's what we're all about. And I'm sure our listening audience here in the Bahamas would really appreciate the fact that, the windows that he shot it. A lot of times it's not like how you have written it. It shows the impact of greatness that he actually achieved. That's good. I thank you for that.
Well, and look at the opportunity now, Warren. I mean, now with the internet and with Zoom, I mean, you can be in the Bahamas. It doesn't matter if you're born in New York City anymore.
Yes.
You can be born poor in the Bahamas, but
yes.
If you have an internet connection, you have access to the entire planet. You can make your impact without even setting foot off. Why would anybody leave the Bahamas? That's what I ask.
The place that God lives is. Yeah. But that was very profound. I really, was moved listening to as you read.
Now for a commercial break.
Achieve Men, written by Warren Andrew Pinder. In this book, you will learn the 7 steps to achieving your dreams and goals. Given the vision to share how the acronym of the word achieve can be used systematically in your day-to-day life. Each of us is given a unique gift from God. Get your copy today. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook from Amazon.
We now return to today's podcast.
You said niches become riches, right? Okay,
yes.
So our niche is trying to unleash the power within young men and women, not so old, to really fulfill their purpose. All right, to understand it, we're here spreading positivity, giving hope, inspiring others to share their successes that others may be inclined to want to do the same, right? Now, how can you spin the story for us? I'm trying to maximize having you on the show. How can our message, how could you assist us with that message?
Yeah, the biggest mistake I see that most people make when they're on stage is they talk about all their successes. And here's what I like to say. Stop talking about your successes, talk about your failures, because not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you talk about your own failures, your own vulnerabilities, as Brene Brown would say, the more you're going to connect with your audience. They're going to see themselves in you. I'll give you an example. I was speaking to some schools in India in 2018. I got all the kids pumped up at one school, and kids were coming up after me afterwards, all excited. And then I see one little 6-year-old boy. He's looking up to me. He has tears in his eyes, and he was missing his left arm. And he looked up and asked, "How can I succeed?" And so I bent down and I got to his eye level, and I said, when I was your age, I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody called me stupid because I stuttered.
Yeah.
And eventually I went to a school and a teacher worked with me one-on-one, and she would sing things to me, and I found I could sing them back without my stutter, kind of like the movie The King's Speech.
Right.
And eventually I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked into that boy's eyes. I'm like, isn't it interesting that the little boy that everybody used to make fun of because he couldn't talk right now gets paid ridiculous sums of money to travel the planet to do what? And he has a smile on his face. He said, "Speak." I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you what you cannot do. I always say the people that tell you that you can't, really what they're saying is they can't.
Yes.
Don't let them put their limitations on you. God created you for bigger purposes. And so everything that you're doing, I mean, how many of your friends, Warren, this is a very serious question. How many of your friends have said, "Oh, I'm going to start a podcast"? They never do anything. they're like politicians. They quack, quack, quack. They talk, but they don't do anything. You created a podcast. You're well ahead of the game. You have no idea. I always tell people it doesn't matter how many people are listening. All that matters is who is listening.
Yes.
If you only have one person listening to your podcast and it happens to be Oprah Winfrey, that's a pretty good audience, I'd say.
I must say, yes. Yes, I must say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in a very serious note, I mean, there's a lot of people hurting out there. And the people that are hurting are the people that look like they have their act together. You would never know that inside they just feel like a failure. They want to give up. Maybe they want to commit suicide, but maybe they listen to your podcast and something you said triggers something in their head. It says, you know what? Maybe I should keep on trying. I mean, you're doing a huge public service, and that's why I was eager to meet you, because I really believe in everything that you're doing, Warren. Keep on doing it.
I so appreciate that. You know, in this space of podcasting, there are so many persons, you know, a lot of NBA players, we're learning that, you know, they're seeing this as their second career, or, you know, the way out, or, you know, to really get into real life. But the message is what really drives us. We knew that literally through, you know, I go back to the first book that I penned, Achieve Men, just simply speaking on, you know, the acronyms of the word achieve. And I just coined the book around, you know, taking actions, charting a course, identifying hurdles with, you know, intensity, 100% effort based on the values. You'll earn whatever it is. So to me, it was a systematic concept that I'm still pushing, and I'm speaking to persons to let them know that you can achieve whatever it is that you have, because God gave you serious gifts and talents. You know, it's just a matter of you finding what is it that makes you happy in doing, and finding that you want to share, that the fire burns and nothing can put it out. You know, there's nothing can put it out. And that's how I feel. My message really going forward, to say that I'm by profession, right, a construction manager. All right. I know that there's nothing in the world that I cannot build. I'm fascinated and moved by, I could recall me saying that, oh, when I came back to the Bahamas, I want a $10 million building to build. I want to build a 20-story skyscraper. Some things may not be realistic, but I'm now on my third $10+ million building. I don't think I'll ever build a 20. I've done a 3-story, you know, and so it proves that in speaking and believing, you know, these things can be achieved. So our message is to persons to understand that regardless of where you are, and knowing, just knowing in your heart, having the desire, the passion, that you will elevate. And it's like having friends like yourself, like Danny, having Danny on my podcast to explain to persons that, you know, you can share your stories. And this is so like the synergy of this is just, I don't know, it's like timely, but the synergy to tell persons like, man, Danny, I have so many stories, right? I could tell you, persons that know myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was described once by a friend that said, Andrew is just a magnet to trouble, right? So I was happy to hear you say that it's okay to share the negative stories. You know, you want to protect your character, you know, a lot of things, but at the end of the day, it's all about really motivating and inspiring others. And I feel that, you know, today we have done that. We have really done that. Any last words that you can share with our audience, you know, and letting them know that they are born to achieve greatness?
Well, as a thank you to you and your audience, Warren, for having to endure me, I wanted to give everybody a free gift. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, again, free story guide, like a tour guide, freestoryguide.com, I'm going to give everybody their own well-crafted story blueprint. What this is the guide to the process that Coach Jimmy and I actually take our clients through in order to create their own well-crafted presentations. What this does for you is it takes the guesswork out of where to put this story and where to put this story and why you're putting them in this parts of your presentation. And what this means for you is the peace of mind that you can actually have a greater impact on your audience and turn them into converting clients. You can get that at freestoryguide.com. And first of all, thank you for all that you do. I mean, you have a great metaphor for what you've gone from building up buildings to building up people.
Oh yeah,
is great, Warren. But I'll end with exactly the same refrain. Whether I was teaching my little ones or my older ones, as they exited my classroom, I always said to them, "Remember, kids, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So let's go out, do the right thing, and make this world a better place." And I'm very glad that people like you out there are making this world a better place. Keep on doing it, Warren.
And Danny, before you go, I'll tell you something. If you look at my book, the last sentence of my book says, "What have you done to impact the world?" And that's a profound question. It's like, and I said, and it meant the world because it's the little things that could catch a fire that someone great may emerge. So I want to thank you. It's been a joy having you here. I've learned a lot. I'm gonna go and actually get my free coffee as well.
Sure.
So I just, again, maybe sometime we can do this again, because I'm sure it's far more that you have to assist with. But appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. Anytime, Warren.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Born to Achieve. Born to Achieve. We hope you found it informative, inspiring, and motivating. Born to Achieve. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Stay focused on your goals, and we'll see you on the next episode of Born to Achieve.
Take advantage of this incredible opportunity. Sign up today and claim your free ebook at www.borntoachievegreatness.com. Follow us on Facebook at Achieve Movement Inc. Get your copy of Exploring Achieveland, A Journey to Realize Your Dreams, Motivational Stories of Kindness, Inspiring Stories for Kids on Amazon and Kindle.